Chapter 1. The Blueprint of Absolutism. Kim Jong-un is portrayed as a cartoonish tyrant, a nuclear gambler, an isolated god king. To dismiss him as a madman is a fundamental error. It mistakes the mask for the man. His story is not one of insanity, but of cold, rational inheritance. He is the third-generation heir to the most successful family business in the history of tyranny. His regime is not a normal government. It is a cult with an army and a nuclear arsenal. Its core product is not prosperity, but the unbroken survival of its own myth. To peer inside his mind is to decode a predicament, the ultimate dilemma of absolute power. Every tool he uses to keep himself safe makes his nation weaker. Every missile he fires to scare the world tightens the sanctions that strangle his people. He rules a prison of ideology where he is both the warden and the most privileged inmate. This prison was not of his own design. The world he inherited in 2011 was a perfectly engineered artifact. His grandfather, Kim Il-sung, the eternal president, was the architect. In the ruins of the Korean War, he built not just a state, but a state religion with himself as its living god. He crafted Juche, the ideology of self-reliance, which was less an economic plan and more a psychological fortress to explain away failure. His father, Kim Jong-il, was the systems engineer. He inherited the cult and industrialized its control. He formalized the military-first policy, making the army the ultimate pillar of the regime. He perfected the surveillance state and used catastrophe, even famine, as a tool to break society and enforce total dependence on the Kim family. By the time Kim Jong-un stood before his father's coffin, the system was complete. He did not need to invent anything. He inherited the finished blueprint, a country that functions less as a nation and more as a high-security compound. His first and only task was to prove he could run the machine. To maintain a hereditary dictatorship in the 21st century requires more than repression. It requires a comprehensive, self-reinforcing system. North Korea's rule is a trinity of control, a political, psychological, and informational lockbox. The first pillar is Songun, military-first politics. The world sees North Korea's military parades as foreign provocations, but this misunderstands their primary purpose. Songun is a domestic power contract, the regime's foundational promise to its most crucial constituency, the officer corps. By legally and economically prioritizing the military over all other sectors, healthcare, education, agriculture, Kim Jong-un ensures its absolute loyalty. The Korean People's Army is the regime's armed shareholder. This creates a perverse but stable logic. National suffering proves the need for a strong military. A strong military ensures the leadership's survival. Therefore, the leadership is justified in perpetuating the suffering. It is a perfect closed loop of power. The second pillar is Juche, the ideology of self-reliance. Its failure as an economic model is irrelevant to its success as a psychological weapon. Juche is not designed to produce goods. It is designed to manufacture reality. It systematically reframes every failure of the state as an act of heroic defiance. Empty shelves are not a sign of mismanagement, but proof of a righteous struggle. Blackouts are not infrastructure collapse, but a collective sharing of burden. The ideology performs a critical alchemy. It transforms poverty into patriotism, hunger into sacrifice, and isolation into spiritual purity. The third and most vital pillar is total information control. While Songun controls the body and Juche shapes the mind, the state's information monopoly strives to annihilate alternative thought at its source. For the Pyongyang elite, state media presents a curated fantasy of strength. For the masses, it is a tool of pure instruction and fear. This effort is backed by a surveillance apparatus of informants and mandatory self-criticism sessions that make private doubt a potentially fatal risk. The goal is to make the state's fictional narrative the only conceivable reality. Together, these three pillars form the Pyongyang doctrine. They do not aim to develop a nation, but to preserve a dynasty. It is a machine whose sole function is to keep itself running. Chapter 3: The Performance of Power. For a regime built on myth, image is everything. Kim Jong-un does not merely govern. He stars in a continuous, high-stakes political drama where every gesture and prop is meticulously scripted. His rule is a performance of power, a symbolic language for his elite, his people, and the outside world. His cultivated image is a calculated paradox. He is the modernizer and the traditionalist fused into one. The Western-style suits and the presence of his wife, Ri Sol-ju, project a contemporary confidence. Yet this is carefully balanced with deliberate echoes of his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, his rounded physique, his wide smile, his occasional donning of the traditional parka. He is performing a delicate act, suggesting progress without threatening the foundational cult. His public appearances are state-managed theater. His field guidance, visits to factories and farms, clad in workwear, perform the role of the nation's hands-on CEO. His emotional displays, like tears at military parades, are potent political tools. In a culture of strict control, the leader's sanctioned tears demonstrate a sacred connection to the military and revolutionary lineage, binding the audience to him in shared, orchestrated sentiment. This symbolic language reaches its apex with the nuclear program. These tests are the regime's ultimate pieces of political theater. Domestically, each launch is a propaganda masterpiece, framing Kim as the architect of national strength and providing proof that the state ideology worked. To the international audience, the same act is calibrated extortion, a dramatic raising of the stakes designed to shatter diplomatic complacency and force concessions. The message is clear. You can ignore our suffering, but you cannot ignore our power. Every aspect of his visible rule, from a tear to a missile, is part of a unified script. He is directing a grand national epic where he is the sole author, lead actor, and most devoted audience. The stability of his reign depends on this show going on flawlessly forever. Chapter 4: The Survival Calculus, the Nuclear Gambit. To the outside world, North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons is an act of irrational provocation, but within the cold logic of the Kim dynasty, it is the single most rational, non-negotiable project of the state. Nuclear weapons are not merely tools of war. They are the ultimate multi-purpose survival tool for a regime that sees itself in a permanent state of siege. This gambit has evolved across 3 generations. Kim Il-sung relied on a massive conventional bluff, an oversized army, and a willingness to threaten war to extract aid and concessions. Kim Jong-il escalated the game, initiating the nuclear program as a more potent, ambiguous threat, keeping the world guessing and negotiating. But Kim Jong-un has changed the game entirely. He has transformed a latent threat into a nuclear fait accompli. Under his watch, the program has accelerated from crude tests to a demonstrated, diversified arsenal with intercontinental reach. He has moved from seeking leverage to possessing an undeniable installed asset. The global community is no longer negotiating to prevent a program. It is negotiating hopelessly over a reality that already exists. For the Kim dynasty, nuclear weapons were fundamentally a regime survival insurance policy with a deterrence clause written in blood. The lesson they have internalized is not from World War II, but from the 21st century, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Gaddafi surrendered his nascent nuclear program in 2003 for promises of reconciliation and trade. 8 years later, he was overthrown and killed by Western-backed rebels. In Pyongyang, this was not seen as a tragedy of geopolitics, but as the ultimate object lesson. The message is seared into the regime's doctrine. Beyond deterrence, the arsenal is the master key for diplomatic extortion. By mastering the cycle of provocation and charm, Kim Jong-un transforms his weapons into the only lever powerful enough to pry open the door to sanctions relief and economic aid. A missile test creates a crisis. An offer for denuclearization talks offers a release from that crisis. The goal is not to disarm, but to use the perpetual threat of the weapons to extract concessions while keeping the weapons themselves. Most critically domestically, the nuclear program is the regime's crowning propaganda achievement. In a country with chronic food shortages and a stagnant economy, the ability to detonate a hydrogen bomb and fire missiles over Japan is tangible, awe-inspiring proof that the Juche ideology of self-reliance and the Songun military first policy are triumphs. It provides a narrative of strength and scientific prowess that the state can offer its people in lieu of prosperity. The nuclear program is not just a shield against foreigners. It is the central pillar holding up the domestic myth of the dynasty's divine genius and inevitable victory. Therefore, the nuclear gambit is simply the core strategic engine. It is the ultimate solution to the regime's existential dilemma, simultaneously guaranteeing its security from external overthrow, providing its primary tool for international engagement, and validating its entire ideological reason for being to its own population. To ask Kim Jong-un to give it up is not to ask for a policy change. It is to ask him to cancel his own insurance, surrender his only leverage, and dismantle his greatest domestic achievement. In the survival calculus of a dictatorial dynasty, that is not a negotiation. It is a suicide note. Chapter 5. The Internal Contradiction, the Rot Within. For all its terrifying efficiency, the regime's perfect system is engineered with fatal compounding flaws. The very mechanisms that ensure short-term survival are planting the seeds of long-term decay. The fortress has cracks, and they are widening from within. The Songun policy, which prioritizes the military over all else, is an economic stranglehold. It directs scarce resources to missiles, not markets, to artillery, not agriculture. International sanctions are devastating, not because they create new problems, but because they exploit this pre-existing, self-inflicted weakness. The state-run economy is a ghost. In its place, out of sheer necessity, an unofficial grassroots capitalism has taken root, the Zhangmadang, or black markets. These markets create a new class with a mindset alien to Juche, a class of traders, not soldiers, of individual entrepreneurs, not collective subjects. Their loyalty is to survival and profit, not to the state. They represent the first independent power base in decades, one whose interests are fundamentally at odds with total state control. Despite the world's most ruthless information blockade, reality seeps in. Smuggled USB drives, DVDs, and illegal radios act as digital samizdat, carrying South Korean dramas, Chinese news, and Hollywood films. This creates a powerful and dangerous cognitive dissonance. For a citizen raised on propaganda depicting the outside world as a hellscape of poverty and misery, seeing the gleaming streets of Seoul or the ordinary prosperity in a Chinese soap opera is world-shattering. It doesn't immediately spark revolution, but it corrodes the absolute authority of the state's narrative, especially in border regions. The regime's greatest fear is not an invading army, but a comparative idea. Even at the pinnacle of power, the system breeds instability. Kim Jong-un's reign has been marked by startlingly public purges and executions, most famously that of his own uncle, Jang Song-taek, once considered the regime's second most powerful man. These acts are not signs of strength, but of profound paranoid insecurity. They send a clear message to the inner circle. There is no tenure, only temporary reprieve. This fosters an environment of fearful sycophancy, not loyal stewardship. It ensures that no alternative power center can challenge the leader, but it also means the regime is led by men and women who are incentivized to hide problems and tell the leader only what he wants to hear, a recipe for catastrophic miscalculation. The rot is internal, systemic, and spreading. The regime's walls are designed to keep everything out, but they are also trapping the contradictions inside, allowing them to ferment. Chapter 6. The Dilemma. No exit. This brings us to the heart of Kim Jong-un's predicament, the inescapable box. Every possible path forward for the nation threatens the survival of the regime itself. He is not playing a game he can win. He is just managing a system with no exit strategy. There are multiple paths Kim Jong-un can go on. The first one is following China's steps. This is the path the outside world perpetually hopes for. But for the Kim dynasty, it is the path to certain oblivion. True economic liberalization would require connecting to the global internet, welcoming foreign investment, and empowering private entrepreneurs, the very Jiangmadang traders. This would unleash an unstoppable flood of information and create independent centers of wealth and influence. The Juche myth of self-reliance would evaporate overnight. The ideological control pillar would collapse, followed swiftly by the political one. The dynasty would not survive its own success. Reform is thus not a policy option. It is regime suicide. The second path is just maintaining the status quo. This is the current course. Maintain total control, double down on isolation, and use nuclear brinksmanship to periodically extract enough aid to keep the core system afloat. But this path is a slow-motion disaster. It means accepting permanent economic stagnation, a population growing increasingly aware of its deprivation, and the constant hair-trigger risk of a catastrophic miscalculation. One missile test, too many, one intercepted shipment, one moment of misread diplomacy could trigger a conflict that the nuclear arsenal makes unthinkably destructive. The status quo is a dance on the edge of a volcano. Path 3 is the wait-and-see paradox. Kim may believe time is on his side, that he can simply outlast his enemies. But this is likely an illusion. The internal contradictions, the spreading markets, the smuggled information, grow stronger with each passing year. The nuclear deterrent becomes more sophisticated, but so does the discontent and the cognitive gap among his people. The world may adapt to a nuclear North Korea, finding ways to contain it indefinitely, leaving the regime to stew in its own decaying isolation. Time does not freeze the rot, it accelerates it. Kim Jong-un's dilemma is therefore perfect and unsolvable. Every tool he has to keep himself in power deepens the sickness within his state. He is the chief engineer of a machine that is running out of road, navigating a labyrinth where every door is marked self-destruction. Chapter 7. The Dynasty and the World. The longevity of the Kim dynasty forces upon us a set of profoundly uncomfortable truths. It is not an archaic relic stumbling into the modern world. It is a monstrously effective adaptation to its environment. It has survived not despite its brutality and isolation, but because of them. It has turned poverty into a control mechanism and paranoia into a governing principle. The international community, particularly the world's democracies, is trapped in a parallel dilemma of its own. Engagement, offering talks and aid, feeds the regime, legitimizes it, and funds its weapons programs. Confrontation, through sanctions and pressure, strengthens the regime's central persecution narrative, giving it the external enemy it needs to justify its internal tyranny. Military action is rendered unthinkable by the nuclear deterrent. There is no good option, only a choice between bad and catastrophic. The story of Kim Jong-un transcends the man. It is a tragic, modern case study in the ultimate corruption of power. It demonstrates how absolute control can construct a prison so total that the ruler himself becomes its most prominent inmate, doomed to pace the battlements forever, holding the keys he dare not use. The dynasty's legacy is a warning that the most perfect system for preserving one man's power can simultaneously be the perfect instrument for a nation's ruin.